The glossy magazine trembled in James Harrison's weathered hands as he stared at his own sunburnt face on the pages of Vogue. Surrounded by his golden sunflowers, he looked nothing like the struggling farmer he'd been just weeks before. The woman who'd asked to take a few photos in his field wasn't just any photographer. She was Anna Wintour's protégé and Vogue's rising star. Now his phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from fashion brands. Tourists were trampling through his property, and a luxury skincare line wanted to bottle the authentic essence of his farm. James had accidentally become fashion's newest obsession, and his quiet life would never be the same. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The sun beat down mercilessly on James Harrison's back as he trudged through the rows of struggling sunflowers. At 43, his face was lined with the kind of weathering that came from years under an unforgiving sky, his once black hair now streaked with premature gray. 6 generations of Harrisons had worked this land in western Nebraska, but he might be the last. 3 years of drought had withered his crops, and the bank's patience was wearing as thin as his soil. "Just one more season," he muttered to himself, a daily mantra that had started to sound hollow even to his own ears. The sunflowers were supposed to be his salvation crop that could withstand the increasingly harsh conditions while producing oil that fetched a decent price. But this year, even they struggled, their proud heads drooping slightly in the relentless heat. The irrigation system had broken down twice already, draining what little reserve funds he had left. The next mortgage payment loomed just 6 weeks away, and the numbers in his worn ledger book refused to add up no matter how many times he recalculated. James paused, wiping sweat from his brow with a faded bandana. Despite everything, the field still held a stark beauty, acre after acre of gold and green, stretching toward the horizon under the vast blue Nebraska sky. He'd always found peace here, but today, the beauty felt like a cruel joke, a pretty veil over his impending failure. The distant sound of tires on gravel pulled him from his thoughts. He wasn't expecting deliveries, and bill collectors usually called before they made the long drive out. Squinting against the sun, he could make out an unfamiliar silver car winding its way up the dusty road to his farmhouse. By the time he reached the end of the field, a woman had emerged from the car. She stood beside it, one hand shading her eyes as she surveyed the sunflower field, the other holding an expensive-looking camera. She was clearly not from around. Here her clothes were too polished, her posture too confident. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and even from a distance, James could tell her sunglasses cost more than his best pair of work boots. "Can I help you?" he called out, trying to keep the wariness from his voice. The last thing he needed was another seed company representative trying to sell him on some miracle crop that required expensive proprietary pesticides. The woman turned, a smile brightening her face. "I certainly hope so," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of an accent he couldn't quite place. "I'm Sophia Vega." She stepped forward, extending a hand that was surprisingly firm in its grip despite her slender fingers. Up close, James revised his initial assessment. She wasn't just polished, she was striking, with sharp cheekbones and intelligent eyes that assessed him with equal curiosity. "James Harrison," he offered, suddenly conscious of his dirt-stained hands and sweat-soaked shirt. "Mr. Harrison, I know this is unexpected, but I'm a photographer passing through on my way to Colorado," Sophia explained, gesturing to her camera. "I was absolutely captivated by your sunflower field as I drove by. The light here is extraordinary." James glanced back at his struggling crop, wondering if they were looking at the same field. "They've seen better days," he said with a shrug. "No, they're perfect," Sophia insisted, her eyes lighting up with genuine enthusiasm. "There's character in them. Not everything beautiful has to be perfect." She paused, seeming to choose her next words carefully. "I'd like to take some photographs if you wouldn't mind. I'd be happy to pay you for access to the field." James hesitated. There was something about the intensity of her interest that made him uneasy, but he was in no position to turn down money, no matter how small the amount. "What kind of photographs?" he asked. "Just artistic shots, the flowers, the landscape." She hesitated. "And perhaps a few with you in them?" the farmer among his crop. There's something compelling about that narrative. James almost laughed. There was nothing compelling about a failing farmer with dirt under his fingernails and worry lines etching deeper by the day. But Sophia was already reaching for her wallet. "I can pay you $500 for a few hours of your time," she said, and his refusal died in his throat. $500 would fix the irrigation system that had been giving him trouble all month. "I'm not much for having my picture taken," he said instead, a token protest. Sophia smiled as if she'd already won. "Just be yourself. That's all I'm looking for, authenticity." James didn't know what a woman like Sofia Vega wanted with pictures of his sunflowers, much less pictures of him. But as he nodded his agreement, he had no idea that authenticity was precisely what would turn his life upside down. Sophia moved through the sunflower field like someone who knew exactly what she wanted, adjusting settings on her camera with quick, practiced movements. James stood awkwardly at the edge of the field, unsure of what to do with himself. "The light is perfect right now," Sophia called out, motioning for him to join her. "Can you walk through here, just as you normally would?" James felt self-conscious as he stepped between the rows, the familiar path suddenly foreign under Sophia's watchful lens. "I usually check the irrigation lines and look for signs of pests," he explained, falling into his usual routine despite his discomfort. "That's perfect," Sophia encouraged, her camera clicking rapidly. "Just pretend I'm not here." Easier said than done, James thought, but he tried to focus on the task at hand. He checked the soil moisture with practiced fingers, examined leaves for discoloration, and gently tilted a sunflower head to inspect it for seed development. Gradually, he forgot about Sophia's presence, losing himself in the familiar rhythm of the work that had defined his life. "These aren't doing too well, are they?" Sophia asked after a while, her tone sympathetic rather than judgmental. James looked up, surprised by her perception. Most people only saw the picturesque aspect of the flowers, not the subtle signs of struggle he lived with daily. 3 years of drought," he confirmed. "Last year was bad. This year's worse. I'm having to irrigate twice as often, and water costs are through the roof." Sophia nodded, snapping a few more pictures of his hands as he crumbled the dry soil between his fingers. "My father was a farmer in Spain," she offered. "Olives, not sunflowers. But I understand the relationship with the land, the constant watching of the sky." There was something in her voice that rang true, and James found himself relaxing slightly. "Your family still farm?" A shadow crossed Sophia's face. "No. The farm was sold after my father died. My mother moved us to New York. I was 16. James nodded, understanding the unspoken loss in her words. 6 generations of Harrisons have worked this land," he said. "I might be the last." Sophia lowered her camera, her expression thoughtful. "May I ask why sunflowers? It's not the most common crop in this region, is it?" The question was innocent enough, but it touched on something deeply personal. James hesitated before answering. "My wife, Rebecca, loved them," he said finally. "She always wanted to see fields of them, like in those pictures from Tuscany. After she died, I started growing them commercially. Practical enough choice, they're drought-resistant, good for the soil. But mostly, I did it for her." He hadn't meant to reveal so much to a stranger, but there was something about Sophia that invited confidence. Perhaps it was the way she listened, really listened, her eyes never leaving his face. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said simply. 8 years ago, James replied with a small shrug that did nothing to diminish the weight of those years. "Cancer. Too young." Sophia nodded, not offering platitudes, which he appreciated. Instead, she lifted her camera again. "The way you look at these flowers, even now when they're struggling, there's such care there. Would you mind if I captured that?" For the next 2 hours, Sophia directed him through a series of shots, some working, some simply standing among the flowers, some looking out over his land. Despite his initial discomfort, James found himself following her instructions with increasing ease. There was something almost hypnotic about her confident direction, the clear vision she seemed to have. "I think we've got it," Sophia finally announced, reviewing images on her camera with evident satisfaction. The sun had moved lower in the sky, casting the field in a warm golden light that transformed even the struggling flowers into something magical. As they walked back to the farmhouse, Sophia asked questions about his daily routine, the challenges of modern farming, the history of the land. James found himself opening up more than he had to anyone in years, sharing stories of his childhood on the farm, the changes he'd witnessed, the constant battle against forces beyond his control. At the car, Sophia handed him an envelope with the promised payment. "Thank you for today," she said. "I've got something special here, I can feel it." James pocketed the envelope, feeling slightly dazed by the strange interlude in his typically solitary existence. "What will you use these for, a magazine?" Sophia smiled enigmatically as she placed her camera carefully in its case. "Let's just say they'll be seen by people who appreciate beauty in unexpected places." She handed him a business card with her name and contact information. "I'll send you copies when they're published." As the silver card disappeared down the dusty road, James stood for a long moment in the gathering dusk. The encounter already felt dreamlike, and he half expected to find the envelope empty when he checked it later. But the 5 crisp $100 bills were real enough, and the next day, he used them to fix the irrigation system without having to dip into funds earmarked for the mortgage payment. Within a week, he had almost forgotten about Sofia Vega and her camera, his days once again consumed by the endless tasks of keeping his farm afloat. Until the magazine arrived. It was nearly a month later when the package appeared on his porch. James had been in town buying parts for his tractor, another unexpected expense that had kept him awake the night before, calculating and recalculating his dwindling funds. He almost missed the padded envelope propped against his door, his mind occupied with how many hours of work lay ahead if he wanted to get the tractor running by morning. The return address listed a Manhattan location he didn't recognize. Inside was a note on heavy cream-colored paper and a glossy magazine sealed in protective plastic. "Thank you for sharing your story with me. Sometimes beauty speaks louder than words. Sofia Vega." The magazine was Vogue. James stared at it blankly for a moment, the incongruity of the publication in his calloused hands so great that he almost laughed out loud. What would Sophia's photographs be doing in a fashion magazine? A small feature in the back, perhaps, artistic shots of rural America as some kind of visual palette cleanser after pages of skinny models in overpriced clothes? Then, he turned it over and saw his own face staring back at him from the cover. The shock was so complete that he sank down onto the porch steps, his legs suddenly unable to support him. There he was, standing in his field at sunset, sunflowers stretching out behind him, his face turned partly away from the camera, eyes on the horizon. The lighting transformed his weathered features into something almost noble, the lines of hardship recast as character, his simple work clothes somehow dignified against the dramatic landscape. The headline read, "The American Heartland, Vogue Goes Rural," and in smaller type beneath it, "Authenticity, Sustainability, and the New Luxury." With trembling hands, James opened the magazine. Inside was an 8-page spread featuring his farm, his sunflowers, and himself. Sophia's photographs were stunning, capturing the harsh beauty of his struggling land with an artist's eye. But it was the pictures of him that were truly transformative. Who was this man with the thoughtful gaze and dignified bearing? This couldn't be the same person he saw in his bathroom mirror each morning, the one with worry permanently etched between his brows. The accompanying article quoted him extensively, though he had no memory of a formal interview. Simply his casual conversations with Sophia, transformed into profound observations about sustainability, the value of tradition, the relationship between humans and the land. There were even mentions of Rebecca and how her memory lived on in his fields of sunflowers, private thoughts he'd shared without realizing their significance. James Harrison represents a vanishing American archetype, the article proclaimed. In an age of synthetic experiences and digital filters, Harrison's authentic connection to the land offers a powerful counter-narrative to our disconnected modern existence. His sunflower farm struggling against climate change yet persisting through generations of family stewardship has become an unexpected symbol for a fashion industry increasingly concerned with sustainability and ethical sourcing." Unquote. The article went on to explain that Sofia Vega wasn't just any photographer but Vogue's newly appointed director of photography, hand-selected by Anna Wintour herself, to bring fresh perspectives to the magazine. This rural American series was her debut project, and James's farm was its centerpiece. Accompanying the photographs were images of models dressed in expensive clothes that somehow echoed the earthy tones and textures of his farm. One striking model wore a gown the exact golden yellow of his sunflowers. According to the caption, the entire fashion collection had been inspired by Sofia's photographs of his farm, with top designers creating pieces that celebrated the authentic American aesthetic embodied by Harrison Sa. Generational stewardship. James closed the magazine, his head spinning. What did this mean? Nothing, probably. A strange interlude, a moment of urban fascination with rural life that would quickly fade when the next trend caught their attention. He set the magazine aside and went to work on his tractor, determined to focus on the real problems at hand rather than the surreal experience of seeing himself in a magazine he'd never read. But the world had other ideas. The first sign that something had changed came the next morning. James was elbow-deep in tractor grease when a car pulled up his driveway, then another, and another. By noon, there were 7 vehicles parked haphazardly around his farmhouse, and people with cameras wandering through his sunflower fields. "Excuse me," he called out to a young couple taking selfies with his flowers. "This is private property." "Oh, we know. We're such huge fans," the woman gushed, holding up her phone to show an Instagram pasta photograph of his Vogue cover. "We drove all the way from Omaha when we realized it was only 3 hours away. Are you really James Harrison?" Before he could answer, she was posing beside him while her companion snapped pictures. James stood frozen, grease-stained and bewildered, as the woman thanked him and hurried off to explore more of the farm. Similar scenes repeated throughout the day. People arrived with copies of Vogue, with cameras, with excited expressions. They wanted photos of the fields, photos with him, stories about the farm. Some asked to buy sunflowers, offering far more than market price for the experience of taking home a stem from the Vogue farm. By sunset, James had made over $2,000 in impromptu sunflower sales and had appeared in countless photographs with strangers. His phone, which typically rang only with calls from suppliers or the occasional neighbor, now buzzed constantly with voices he didn't recognize, asking about farm tours, photography permits, and interviews. One call, however, stood out from the rest. It came just as he was contemplating putting up a "no trespassing" sign to stem the tide of visitors. "Mr. Harrison? This is Elaine Winters from Soleil Organics." The woman's voice was brisk and professional. "We're a luxury skincare company based in Los Angeles, and we're very interested in discussing a potential partnership with you and your farm." "Partnership?" James echoed, still struggling to process the day's events. "Yes. After seeing Sofia Vega's incredible work in Vogue, our creative team has been absolutely inspired by your story and your sunflowers. We'd like to develop a skincare line based on bay, sunflower oil from your farm specifically. We believe there's something special about the way you grow them, the generations of care, the authentic approach. Our customers respond to that kind of narrative." End quote. James almost laughed. His authentic approach was simply doing what farmers had done for generations, with far fewer resources than his grandfather had enjoyed. And his sunflowers, beautiful as they might be in Sofia's artistic lens, were struggling commercially, their yield compromised by drought and his inability to afford the latest agricultural innovations. "My sunflowers aren't doing that well this season," he said honestly. "That's part of what makes this compelling, Mr. Harrison. Real ingredients from a real farm, facing real challenges. Authenticity is the new luxury." She paused. "We're prepared to offer you a very generous contract, including a signing bonus that would be paid immediately upon agreement." "How generous?" James asked, caution warring with desperate hope. The figure she named made him grip the phone tighter, certain he'd misheard. It was enough to pay off his mortgage entirely and keep the farm running for years. even through extended drought. "I'd need to think about it," he managed to say, though every instinct screamed at him to accept immediately. "Of course. I'll email you the details, and we can set up a proper meeting next week. We'd send a team to your farm to discuss the particulars." Her tone warmed slightly. "Mr. Harrison, we're very excited about this potential partnership. What Sofia Vega captured in those photographs, that's exactly what our brand aspires to represent." After hanging up, James sat at his kitchen table, the same table where generations of Harrisons had calculated crop yields and worried over weather forecasts. His hands shook slightly as he tried to grasp the rapid transformation of his circumstances. This morning he'd been calculating how many months he could hold off. The bank tonight, he was contemplating a contract that would secure his farm's future for years to come. His phone buzzed again, a text message from a number he didn't recognize. "I hope you've seen the magazine. Call me if you need anything. The world's about to discover what I saw in your field that day. Sophie." James stared at the message for a long moment before typing a response. "What did you do?" Her reply came quickly. "I told the truth, through my lens. The rest is just the world responding to authenticity in an age desperate for it." Outside his window, the sunflower fields stretched into the gathering darkness, the same fields that had been slowly breaking his heart with their struggle against the odds. Now, somehow, that very struggle had become their valuand, his salvation. The irony wasn't lost on him, but as he looked out at the land that had been his family's legacy for 6 generations, what he felt wasn't confusion or suspicion, but a tentative, fragile hope. The next morning brought more visitors, more calls, and an email from Elaine Winters with contract details that seemed almost too good to be true. But it was the arrival of another unexpected guest that truly marked how much his life had changed. The sleek black car that pulled up his driveway shortly before noon was like nothing he'd seen before. Clearly expensive, with tinted windows and custom wheels that seemed utterly out of place on his dusty farm road. When the driver's door opened, a tall man in a suit stepped out, looking around with the cautious curiosity of someone exploring foreign territory. "Mr. Harrison?" the man called out, spotting James on the porch. "My name is Adrian Foster. I represent Westfield Agricultural Investments." James felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mild autumn day. Westfield was the corporate farming conglomerate that had been buying up struggling family farms across 3 counties. They'd approached him twice before with offers well below market value, counting on his desperation to force acceptance. "I'm not selling," James said flatly as Adrian approached. "If that's why you're here, you can turn right around." Adrian held up his hands in a placating gesture. "Not here to buy you out, Mr. Harrison. Quite the opposite, in fact." He glanced around at the visitors wandering through the sunflower fields. "May we speak privately?" Curiosity overrode caution, and James led him into the kitchen. Adrian declined the offered coffee, instead pulling out a tablet and placing it on the table between them. "Westfield has been watching your situation with great interest," he began, his corporate smoothness at odds with the worn surroundings. "Particularly in light of your recent publicity." "The magazine," James said flatly. "The magazine, yes, but more importantly, the response to it." Adrian swiped through screens on his tablet. "Your farm has become something of a phenomenon on social media. #Vogue Farm has over 2 million posts. Tourism bureaus and BR. 3 counties are promoting routes to your location. And we understand Soleil Organics has approached you with a substantial offer." End quote. James kept his expression neutral, unsettled by how much this stranger knew about his business. "What's your point?" "Westfield would like to propose a partnership, not a purchase," Adrian explained, turning the tablet to show a detailed presentation. "We'd provide capital investment for expanded sunflower production, agricultural expertise to improve yields despite drought conditions, and logistics support for what we anticipate will be significant commercial opportunities beyond Soleil." "Ah." James studied the man across from him, looking for the trap. "And what do you get?" "A percentage of profits, yes, but more importantly, association with the James Harrison brand that's rapidly developing." Adrian leaned forward. "What Sofia Vega captured wasn't just a struggling farmer, Mr. Harrison. She captured an American ideal at exactly the moment when consumers are craving authenticity, That has extraordinary value. I'm not a brand, James protested, the very concept foreign to his understanding of himself. I'm just trying to keep my farm afloat. Adrian's smile was sympathetic but calculating. You became a brand the moment Vogue put you on their cover. The question now is whether you'll control that brand or let others define it for you. He slid a business card across the table. We believe you should benefit fully from what's happening. Our proposal would ensure that, while preserving your farm's legacy and independence. After Adrian left, promising to email detailed terms, James walked out to his sunflower field, now dotted with visitors taking photographs. He felt like a stranger on his own land, watching people capture images of flowers he'd planted with his own hands, now transformed into symbols of something he didn't fully understand. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. How are you holding up? Confused, he typed back honestly. Corporate farming companies want to partner with me now, instead of forcing me out. Skincare companies want my struggling sunflowers for their authentic essence. What is happening? You've become valuable in a new way. In a new way, came her reply. The question is, how to use that value on your own terms. James looked out across the fields his father and grandfather had worked before him. The sunflowers still struggled against drought, their agricultural value compromised. But now people saw beauty in that struggle, meaning in his perseverance. Somehow, his greatest vulnerability had become his greatest asset. That evening, after the visitors had finally departed, James sat on his porch, watching the sunset paint his sunflowers gold. The same view he'd seen thousands of times before, yet somehow fundamentally changed by how others now saw it, how Sophia had taught them to see it. His phone rang, and for a moment, he considered not answering. But something about the unknown number caught his attention. Mr. Harrison? My name is Caroline Lynn, executive producer with Heartland Documentary Films. We specialize in stories about American agricultural traditions, and we're very interested in featuring your farm in our upcoming series. James listened as she outlined a proposal for a documentary about his family's 6 generations of farming, the challenges facing independent farmers, and his unexpected rise to prominence. Unlike the corporate offers, her approach seemed genuinely interested in the truth of his experience, rather than its marketability. We want to tell the real story, Caroline emphasized. Not just the glossy magazine version. The real story isn't very glamorous, James warned. That's precisely why it needs telling, she countered. May I ask why you agreed to the Vogue photo shoot? Did you know who Sofia Vega was? I had no idea, James admitted. She offered me $500 to take pictures in my failing sunflower field. I needed the money to fix my irrigation system. Caroline's laugh was warm and genuine. Now that's the kind of honest detail our audience responds to. When could we send a crew out for some preliminary filming? As he hung up, James realized he'd agreed to yet another transformation of his life story into something for public consumption. But unlike the corporate offers that had left him wary, Caroline's straightforward approach felt right. The chance to balance the glossy Vogue portrayal with something closer to the complicated truth. The sun had fully set now, the first stars appearing above his fields. From his porch, James could see the lights of cars still making their way down the country road toward his farm, modern pilgrims seeking something authentic in a world they found increasingly artificial. He thought of Rebecca, who had loved sunflowers for their simple beauty. What would she make of all this fashion magazines, corporate interest, social media fame? The absurdity of it all nearly overwhelmed him, until he remembered what truly mattered. The land would stay in Harrison hands. The farm would survive. Whatever strange turn his life had taken, that fundamental truth remained. And for now, that was enough. The weeks that followed brought a whirlwind of changes to James Harrison's quiet life. The steady stream of visitors to his farm showed no signs of abating. If anything, it increased as word spread through social media. Local businesses began offering Vogue farm tours, complete with transportation and picnic lunches among the sunflowers. The nearest town, which had been slowly dying as young people moved away, suddenly found itself with a tourist economy. James was inundated with offers and proposals. More skincare companies wanting exclusive rights to his sunflower oil clothing designers seeking to collaborate on Prey. Authentic workwear. Collections reality TV producers pitching shows about rural American life, even dating apps suggesting he become a spokesman for Real Connections. Each morning brought new business cards, contracts, and propositions stuffed in his mailbox or thrust into his hands by earnest representatives who'd made the pilgrimage to his farm. Each evening found him at his kitchen table, poring over documents with increasingly complex legal language, trying to separate the genuine opportunities from the exploitative. After particularly overwhelming days, he would call Sophia. Despite her busy schedule at Vogue, she always made time for his calls, patiently explaining industry terms and offering advice without pushing him in any particular direction. "Remember, you have the power now," she told him during one late-night conversation. "These companies need your authenticity more than you need their money. Don't let them rush you into decisions." "I'm a farmer, not a businessman," James reminded her. "I don't know how to navigate all this." "Then find people you can trust to help you," Sophia advised. "Get a good lawyer, consider an agent, but keep making the final decisions yourself." Following her advice, James hired Lisa Chen, a no-nonsense attorney from Omaha who specialized in agricultural contracts and intellectual property, a combination that would have seemed bizarre to him just months ago but now made perfect sense. Lisa helped him evaluate the flood of offers, her shrewd assessments cutting through the flattery and promises to the substantive terms. The first major decision was the Soleil Organics contract. After multiple revisions and negotiations, James signed an agreement that granted the company limited rights to use oil from his sunflowers, while preserving his control over how his story and image could be used. The signing bonus alone was enough to pay off his mortgage, with the ongoing royalties providing a stable income regardless of crop yields. Next came the documentary, with Caroline Lynn. Unlike many of the reality TV offers, which wanted to manufacture drama and conflict, Caroline's approach emphasized the actual challenges of modern farming and the complex emotions behind James's embrace. Unexpected fame. The filming process became almost therapeutic, allowing him to articulate feelings he'd previously kept buried about Rebecca, about the farm's struggles, about his ambivalence toward his new public persona. The most significant decision, however, concerned the future of the farm itself. After careful consideration and multiple meetings, James declined Westfield's partnership offer. Instead, with Lisa's help, he developed an alternative approach that better aligned with his values. "If this authenticity that everyone suddenly values is real," he explained to Sophia during a rare in-person visit when she returned to photograph the autumn harvest, "then it has to include my community. This farm doesn't exist in isolation." His plan was bold, but rooted in the practical understanding of a lifelong farmer. Using his new financial security and visibility, James established the Harrison Agricultural Cooperative, inviting struggling family farms in the region to join. Together, they could share resources, negotiate better prices for their products, and develop sustainable farming practices suited to the changing climate. Most importantly, the cooperative created a legal structure that would preserve these family farms for future generations, preventing corporate consolidation while adapting to modern realities. The same authenticity that fashion magazines now coveted would be protected not as a marketable commodity, but as a living tradition. Sophia listened to his plans with evident approval. "You're using their fascination with your lifestyle to actually preserve that lifestyle," she observed. "That's rather brilliant." James shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "It's just common sense. If people value what we do here, they should help make sure it continues." As they walked through the sunflower fields, now past their prime but still striking against the autumn sky, Sophia stopped to adjust her camera settings. "Do you regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Letting me take those photographs that day?" James considered the question seriously. His life had been upended, his privacy compromised, his daily routines transformed by constant visitors and business demands. Yet the farm that had been slipping through his fingers was now secure. The agricultural practices he believed in had new champions. The community that had been slowly dissolving had found new purpose. "No," he said finally, I don't regret it. But I still don't fully understand it. Why me? Why my struggling sunflowers? There are more successful farms, more photogenic farmers. Sophia lowered her camera, her expression thoughtful. In fashion, perfection is common. We manufacture it daily. What's rare is something authentic, something with visible history, with scars, with struggles that haven't been airbrushed away. She gestured toward the sunflowers, their heads heavy with seeds, slightly bent but persisting. Your farm isn't valuable despite its struggles, it's valuable because of them. The same is true of you. James felt his cheeks warm at the personal assessment, but he recognized the truth in her words. The perfect, Instagram-ready farms weren't the ones capturing public imagination. It was his imperfect, struggling fields that had become symbolic. There's another reason, Sophia added more quietly. Those sunflowers you planted for Rebecca, that kind of love, doing something difficult year after year as an act of remembrance that resonates with people. It's the opposite of our disposable culture. Ah. James hadn't thought of his annual sunflower planting that way. For him, it had simply been what he needed to do, as natural as breathing. That others might find meaning in this private ritual was still strange to consider. The following day brought the first frost, ending the sunflower season definitively. As James walked through the fields assessing the damage, his phone buzzed with a message from Elaine at Soleil Organics. Product launch set for spring. Need you in NYC for press events in February. First-class tickets and accommodations being arranged. Please confirm availability. James paused, looking out over his frost-damaged fields. 6 months ago, the thought of flying to New York for a skincare product launch would have seemed absurd. Now it was just another item on his increasingly crowded calendar. He typed back a tentative agreement, then added to his personal to-do list, call Mom. His mother, now living in a retirement community in Arizona, was endlessly amused by her son's unexpected fame. Always knew you were cover material, she'd teased when he'd sent her the Vogue issue. She'd been after him to visit, and now he could finally afford both the time away from the farm and the airfare. As if conjured by his thoughts, another message appeared, this one from a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Harrison, this is Anna Wintour's office. Ms. Wintour would like to invite you to the Met Gala next May as her personal guest. This year's theme is American Archetypes. Please advise if you can attend. James read the message 3 times, each reading more surreal than the last. He had to Google what the Met Gala was after seeing references to it in some of the fashion coverage of his Vogue appearance. The idea of attending such an event, much less as the guest of the most powerful woman in fashion, was so far beyond his experience that he couldn't form a coherent response. Instead, he forwarded the message to Sophia with a single question mark. Her response came quickly. Say yes. I'll help you navigate it. This is a big deal, James. He trusted her judgment, but the thought of walking a red carpet alongside celebrities in outfits that cost more than his tractor made his stomach knot with anxiety. Would they expect him to wear designer clothes? To make small talk about fashion trends? To pretend he belonged in that world? Before he could spiral further, another text from Sophia arrived. They don't want you to be something you're not. That's the whole point. Just be James Harrison, Nebraska sunflower farmer. That's more than enough. The simple permission to be himself, even in the most rarefied of settings, settled something in James's mind. He texted back a brief acceptance to Anna Wintour's office, then put his phone away and returned to the practical tasks of the farm. Winter arrived early that year, blanketing the fields in snow before Thanksgiving. With the tourist season temporarily halted by weather, James found himself with unexpected time to plan. The Harrison Agricultural Cooperative was taking shape, with 12 local farms now committed to membership. Weekly meetings in his barn, warmed by space heaters and fueled by his mother's cookie recipes, had become a fixture of community life. These gatherings were nothing like the corporate meetings he'd endured while negotiating contracts. There was no pretense here, no carefully crafted images, just generations of farming knowledge sharing space with new sustainable agriculture techniques, the old and new finding common ground in the face of shared challenges. The first shipment of Soleil products arrives next week. James announced during one December meeting. "They're sending samples for everyone here." Maria Gonzalez, whose family farm specialized in heritage corn varieties, raised an eyebrow. "Fancy face cream made from your sunflowers? Still can't believe it." "Join the club," James replied with a self-deprecating smile. "But their money's real enough, and it's helping fund the cooperative's irrigation upgrades." "Speaking of upgrades," said Robert Willis, at 76 the oldest farmer in the group, "when are those solar panels getting installed? My grandson's pestering me about reducing our carbon footprint." The solar initiative had been James's idea, using some of his newfound resources to help cooperative members transition to renewable energy, cutting costs long-term while creating another marketable aspect of their collective sustainability efforts. The university's agricultural extension program had partnered with them, sending graduate students to help design systems suited to each farm's specific needs. "Panels arrive in January," James confirmed. "Installation teams start with the Willis farm, then move east." As the meeting progressed to discussions of spring planting strategies, James found himself observing the gathering with a sense of wonder. These were the same neighbors who'd been struggling in isolation just months ago, each farm an island of increasing desperation. Now they spoke of collective purchasing power, shared equipment investments, coordinated planting schedules to maximize local biodiversity. The transformation wasn't just financial, but cultural. A community remembering its strength lay in connection rather than competition. And somehow, improbably, it had begun with a fashion magazine's brief fascination with authenticity. Later that evening, as the last trucks pulled away from his farmhouse, James received an email from Caroline Lynn with a rough cut of the documentary. Watching it on his laptop at the kitchen table, he was struck by how skillfully she'd captured both his story and the broader context. The film moved between his personal journey, including heartbreaking segments about Rebecca and the sunflowers he'd planted in her memory, and the larger narrative of rural American communities fighting for survival. Most powerful were the before and after sequences. His farm struggling under drought conditions, juxtaposed with the vibrant activity of the cooperative meetings. Empty storefronts in the nearby town, contrasted with newly opened businesses catering to farm visitors. Young people leaving for cities compared with recent graduates returning to work on sustainability initiatives. James appeared throughout, his initial discomfort with the camera gradually giving way to more thoughtful reflections. Watching himself on screen remained a surreal experience, but he had to admit, Caroline had captured something true about both his struggles and his unexpected second chance. The documentary ended with a quiet scene of James walking through his snow-covered fields at sunset, his voice narrating over the image. "I never wanted to be anything but a farmer. 6 generations of my family worked this land, and I hope to pass it to a 7th. That dream nearly died, not because farming isn't valuable, but because we stopped valuing it correctly. Maybe what happened to me is just a fashion trend that will pass. But maybe it's the beginning of remembering what matters: the land, the food it produces, the communities it sustains. If Cap'n. So, then, perhaps, my accidental fame served a purpose greater than selling magazines or face cream. Perhaps it helped us all remember what's been here all along, waiting to be seen again." The screen faded to black, and James sat in silence, moved by words he recognized as his own, but hadn't realized held such power when strung together. Caroline had found meaning in his story that he himself was still discovering. His phone chimed with a new email: the final contract for his appearance at the Met Gala, along with details about the custom outfit being created for him by a designer whose name he vaguely recognized from the fashion coverage he now reluctantly followed. The outfit was described as a modern interpretation of American agricultural workwear, utilizing sustainable fabrics and incorporating subtle sunflower motifs. James shook his head at the continuing absurdity of his situation, then signed the attached document and sent it back. Whatever happened in New York, he would face it as himself a farmer first and foremost, regardless of what labels the fashion world attached to him. January brought a steady stream of changes to the farm and the wider community. The solar panel installation began as scheduled, transforming the region's landscape with sleek black rectangles angled toward the winter sun. Local media covered the initiative extensively, portraying it as a model for rural sustainability. The Soleil Organics products featuring his sunflower oil hit the market in a limited pre-release, selling out within hours despite premium pricing. The packaging featured stylized silhouettes of his farm's landscape and quotes from James about soil health and sustainable farming. Each purchase included a pamphlet about the Harrison Agricultural Cooperative and its mission, along with a QR code linking to donation opportunities for rural farming initiatives. Most unexpectedly, James received an invitation to testify before a congressional committee on agricultural policy. The Harrison Cooperative had attracted attention as a potential model for preserving family farms while adapting to climate challenges. Lisa Chen helped him prepare his testimony, focusing on practical policy changes that would support similar initiatives nationwide. "Just speak plainly," she advised during their preparation sessions. "Your authenticity is your strength. The same quality that attracted Sofia Vega's camera will serve you well in Washington." James still found the word authenticity uncomfortable when applied to himself, as if it were a commodity he possessed, rather than simply his way of being in the world. But he was learning to recognize its power when deployed intentionally rather than exploited by others. His testimony, delivered in a steady voice that occasionally betrayed his nervousness but never his conviction, made more impact than he anticipated. Video clips circulated widely online, particularly his straightforward assessment of corporate farming practices and their impact on rural communities. Agricultural policy wasn't typically the subject of viral media attention, but James's unique position, simultaneously a traditional farmer and an unlikely cultural icon, gave his words unusual reach. "The sunflower farmer is making more sense than most of the committee," read one popular comment. Another observed, "When fashion accidentally leads to substantive policy discussions, you know we're living in strange times." February arrived with his first trip to New York for the Soleil Organics press events. The company had arranged a luxury hotel suite that made James profoundly uncomfortable until he discovered he could see Central Park from his window, a rectangle of nature amid the urban intensity that somehow helped to buy him feel oriented. Sophia met him for breakfast his first morning, her familiar face a welcome sight in the otherwise overwhelming city. She had brought him a gift-framed print of the very first photograph she'd taken of him in the sunflower field, before either of them knew where it would lead. "To remind you who you are, in case the city makes you forget," she said as he unwrapped it. "Not much chance of that," James replied, but he was touched by the gesture. The photograph showed him examining a sunflower, his expression concentrated and genuine, completely unaware of the camera. It captured something essential about his relationship with the land, a connection that predated and would outlast his unexpected fame. The press events were a blur of interviews, photographers, and promotional appearances. James stuck to simple truths about his farm and the cooperative, refusing publicists' attempts to script more marketable responses. To his surprise, this approach resonated strongly with beauty editors and influencers accustomed to carefully crafted brand narratives. "He's the real deal," he overheard one beauty blogger telling another after a group interview. "You can't fake that kind of sincerity." The highlight of the New York trip was a private dinner hosted by Elaine Winters, Soleil's CEO. Instead of the lavish restaurant event James had expected, she had arranged for a renowned chef to prepare a farm-to-table meal in a converted warehouse space, with ingredients sourced from small farms similar to his own. During the dinner, seated between a fashion editor and an environmental activist, James found himself engaged in a surprisingly substantial conversation about agricultural practices and their environmental impact. The fashion editor, it turned out, had grown up on a dairy farm in Vermont and maintained a rooftop garden at her Manhattan apartment. "This whole authenticity trend has been fascinating to watch from inside the industry," she told him. "For years, we've been selling perfectly constructed fantasies. Now suddenly everyone wants something real, something with visible flaws and genuine history. Like struggling sunflowers," James suggested. "Exactly like that." She studied him with professional assessment. "You know, your Met Gala appearance is going to be significant. Anna doesn't extend personal invitations lightly." James shifted uncomfortably. "Still not sure what I'm doing there." "Being yourself. the editor replied simply. In a world of careful construction, that's revolutionary enough. Returning to Nebraska after the whirlwind New York visit, James found comfort in the familiar rhythms of farm life, even in winter's relative quiet. The cooperative meetings continued, now attracting attention from neighboring counties interested in establishing similar models. Graduate students from the university's agricultural program had taken up residence in his guest rooms, conducting soil studies and helping develop drought-resistant planting strategies for the coming season brass. Caroline's documentary received acceptance to several prestigious film festivals, bringing another wave of attention to the farm and the broader issues it represented. National news programs began reaching out for interviews about rural revitalization and sustainable agriculture, positioning James as an unexpected authority on subjects he'd simply lived rather than studied formally. Through it all, he maintained his daily routines, checking equipment, reviewing planting schedules, walking the snow-covered fields at dawn and dusk. These quiet moments kept him grounded as the world around him continued to transform in ways he could never have imagined. As February turned to March, preparations for spring planting began in earnest. The cooperative members gathered more frequently, coordinating their efforts with a new sense of shared purpose. Equipment that had once sat idle on individual farms was now deployed strategically across multiple properties, maximizing efficiency while minimizing costs. The university partnership expanded, bringing additional resources and expertise to the cooperative's sustainability efforts. Solar panels now gleamed on barn roofs throughout the region, their presence a visible symbol of the community's commitment to innovation while honoring traditional farming values. Tourists began returning as the weather warmed, their numbers growing as spring approached. James had worked with local businesses to develop more structured visiting opportunities, reducing the impact on working farm operations, while still allowing people to experience the landscape that had captured their imagination. A portion of visitor fees went directly to the cooperative's educational programs, creating a virtuous cycle that benefited the entire community. One cool March morning, as James reviewed seed inventory in his barn, a familiar silver car appeared in his driveway. Sophia stepped out, camera bag slung over her shoulder, looking much as she had on that first fateful day nearly a year ago. "Thought I'd find you working," she said by way of greeting. "Some things never change." James smiled, genuinely pleased to see her. "What brings you back to Nebraska? More fashion shoots?" "Something like that," Sophia replied, glancing around at the barn's interior, now transformed into a functional office space for the cooperative. Vogue is doing a follow-up piece 1 year later. "The farm that changed fashion. I wanted to handle it personally." She studied him with professional assessment. "You look different." "Do I?" James ran a self-conscious hand over his face, still weathered but perhaps less strained than when they'd first met. "More confident," Sophia clarified. "Less worried. It suits you." James couldn't deny the observation. The crushing anxiety that had been his constant companion for years had receded. The farm was secure. The cooperative was thriving. The community had found new vitality. Despite the occasional discomfort of public attention, the transformation had been overwhelmingly positive. "Come see the fields," he suggested, leading her outside. "We're trying something new this year." They walked together toward the area where sunflowers would soon be planted. But instead of the monoculture he'd previously maintained, the field had been divided into sections, with cover crops already sprouting in careful patterns. "Regenerative agriculture," James explained. "We're integrating multiple species to improve soil health and reduce water needs." The cooperative developed the planting plan together, combining traditional knowledge with new research. Sophia nodded, snapping photographs as he detailed the approach. "So, the sunflowers will be just one part of a larger ecosystem?" "Exactly. We're thinking longer term now, not just about this season's yield, but about the health of the land for generations to come." He paused, realizing the significance of the change. "I couldn't have done this before. The financial risk was too great. I needed every acre producing maximum commercial yield just to stay afloat. And now? Now we can farm better, not just more efficiently. And he gestured toward the neighboring properties, where similar transformations were underway. That's the real story, not one lucky farmer who caught a break, but a community finding a sustainable path forward. Sophia lowered her camera, her expression thoughtful. When I took your photograph that day, I was looking for something authentic in a world of artifice. I never expected to find something that would become a movement. James shook his head. I'm still not comfortable with being seen as the face of anything. I'm just a farmer trying to adapt to changing circumstances like farmers have always done. That's why it works, Sophia insisted. You never tried to become a symbol. You just lived your values consistently, even when the spotlight found you. As they continued walking, a tour group appeared at the edge of the property. Visitors who had paid for the guided experience of the Vogue farm. Their guide, a local college student earning money for agricultural studies, waved respectfully before leading them along the designated path, carefully avoiding active work areas. Does that ever get less strange? Sophia asked, nodding toward the visitors photographing the landscape James had known all his life. Not really, he admitted. But it's created jobs in a community that was losing its young people to cities. That makes the strangeness worthwhile. The tour group moved on, and James and Sophia continued their circuit of the property. She photographed the solar panels, the new irrigation systems, the cooperative shared equipment shed, and a small building that would soon become an educational center for visitors and local students. The Met Gala is next month, Sophia mentioned as they headed back toward the farmhouse. Are you ready? James laughed softly. As ready as a Nebraska farmer can be for something like that. The designer sent sketches of what I'll be wearing. It's not what I'd choose for myself. But you'll do it anyway, Sophia observed. It's part of the deal, he acknowledged. And it keeps attention on the cooperative, which helps everyone here. He paused, considering something he'd been meaning to ask. Will you be there? At the gala? Sophia nodded. Covering it for Vogue. I'll make sure to find you might be the only chance to get an authentic reaction from anyone in that room. The easy rapport between them had deepened over the months since their first meeting, evolving from the initial photographer-subject dynamic into something more balanced. James valued her perspective on the strange world he occasionally inhabited, while Sophia seemed to find something grounding in his steadfast focus on what truly mattered. As April arrived, bringing the first planting of the new season, James found himself increasingly occupied with preparations for both the farm's future and his impending New York appearance. The designer's team had visited for final fittings of his Met Gala outfit, an experience that left him marveling at the attention devoted to clothing that would be worn for a single evening. The documentary premiered at a major film festival, with Caroline Lynn accepting the award for Best Documentary Feature. Her acceptance speech acknowledged James and the cooperative members as the true authors of the story she had merely captured on film. The resulting publicity brought another wave of interest in the farm and its innovative approach to agricultural sustainability. Amidst this continued public attention, James maintained his focus on the practical work at hand. The first sunflower seedlings emerged in their carefully planned sections, no longer struggling in isolation, but supported by companion plants that fixed nitrogen in the soil and deterred pests naturally. The sight of the tender green shoots pushing through the earth filled him with the same quiet joy he'd always found in growing things, a constant that remained unchanged despite everything else that had transformed. On the morning he was set to depart for New York and the Met Gala, James walked through his fields at dawn, saying a silent goodbye to the land that anchored him. Whatever awaited in the glittering world of high fashion, he would carry this place within him, the soil and sky that had shaped 6 generations of Harrisons and would shape many more to come. His phone buzzed with a final confirmation from the car service that would take him to the airport. Before heading inside to collect his luggage, including the garment bag containing the custom outfit he still hadn't fully reconciled himself to wearing, James paused to look back at his farm. The sunflowers were just beginning their journey toward the sun, small and vulnerable, but full of potential. Around them, the cooperative's innovations were taking visible shape, the solar panels catching the first light of day, the efficient irrigation systems waiting to deliver precisely calibrated moisture, the cover crops already strengthening the soil beneath. What Sophia had captured in her photographs wasn't just a struggling farmer and his flowers, James realized. She had seen the dignity and perseverance, the beauty in continuing despite the odds. That was the authenticity the world had responded to. Not some manufactured rural aesthetic, but the genuine commitment to values that transcended fashion or trends. As he turned toward the house, James felt a sense of peace that had been absent during those desperate days before Sophia's arrival. The farm would continue. The legacy would endure. And if his unlikely journey through the worlds of fashion, media, and public policy helped secure that future, then every uncomfortable moment in the spotlight had been worthwhile. The Met Gala was precisely as overwhelming as James had anticipated, a sensory bombardment of entrée, celebrities, designers, photographers, and spectacle that made his quiet Nebraska field seem like a distant dream. Arriving at the Metropolitan Museum in his custom-outfitted, meticulously tailored jacket and pants that somehow referenced traditional workwear while transforming it into high fashion, complete with subtle embroidered sunflower motifs, he felt profoundly out of place, despite the clothes designed to help him belong. Anna Wintour greeted him with brisk efficiency, introducing him to a dizzying succession of fashion luminaries and celebrities whose names he immediately forgot. Camera flashes nearly blinded him as he ascended the famous steps, guided by publicists who had carefully briefed him on where to stand and how to respond to reporters' questions. "Mr. Harrison, how does it feel to be here?" one journalist called out. "Like I took a wrong turn somewhere between my barn and the grain elevator," he replied honestly, earning genuine laughter that cut through the artifice of the moment. As he moved through the elaborately decorated museum spaces, James found himself the object of curious stares and whispered conversations. He recognized a few faces from magazine covers and movies, noting with some amusement that these celebrities seemed as interested in him as an authentic farmer as he was in them as authentic movie stars. "James Harrison," a familiar voice called, and he turned to find Sophia approaching, camera in hand but dressed formally for the event, her professional role temporarily set aside as she navigated the gathering as a guest. "Thank God," he said with feeling. "A face I actually recognize." Sophia laughed, linking her arm through his with easy familiarity. "Come on, farmer. Let me introduce you to some people who won't expect you to know anything about hemlines or this season's color palette." She guided him toward a small group that included an environmental activist, a sustainable fashion designer, and a chef known for pharmaceutical advocacy. The conversation that developed focused on substantive issues of agricultural policy, environmental impact, and rural economic development, an island of meaningful discussion in a sea of fashion small talk. As the evening progressed, James found moments of genuine connection amid the spectacle. A famous actress shared stories of her grandfather's farm in Georgia. An influential designer expressed interest in the bees cooperative's approach to sustainable agriculture. A tech billionaire discussed potential investments in rural internet infrastructure to support innovative farming communities. During a quiet moment, standing at the edge of the crowded room, James found himself beside Anna Wintour herself. The fashion icon regarded him with cool assessment. "You've become quite the phenomenon, Mr. Harrison," she observed. "Not by design," he replied honestly. "The best phenomena rarely are." She sipped her champagne. Sophia's eye for the authentic has always been her greatest strength as a photographer. She saw something in you and your farm that resonated beyond the moment. "I'm still not sure why," James admitted. Anna's expression softened slightly. In a world increasingly dominated by artificial experiences, something genuinely lived has extraordinary power. "Your sunflowers weren't perfect, Mr. Harrison. Neither was your farm, or your story. That's precisely what made them compelling." Before he could respond, she was called away to greet other guests, leaving James to consider her words. The observation echoed what Sophia had told him months ago, that his struggles were not a liability, but the very source of the authenticity others valued. Later, as the gala began to wind down, James stepped outside onto a terrace for a moment of respite from the continuous stimulation. The New York night sky bore little resemblance to Nebraska's star-filled expanse, but the cool air and relative quiet helped center him. Sophia joined him, removing her uncomfortable shoes with a sigh of relief. "Surviving?" she asked. "Barely," he admitted with a small smile. "But I'd learned something tonight." "What's that?" "Everyone's performing to some degree, even here at the pinnacle of fashion and celebrity." He gestured toward the gathering inside. "Some of those people are as uncomfortable in this world as I am, just better at hiding it. Or all just trying to be what others need us to be, while holding on to something real underneath." Sophia considered this. "That's insightful for a farmer who claims to know nothing about fashion." "I know about authenticity now," James replied. "I've had it explained to me by enough marketing teams and brand consultants to last a lifetime." They shared a laugh, comfortable in each other's company despite the surreal surroundings. Tomorrow James would return to Nebraska, to his sunflowers and soil and the community that grounded him. But tonight had shown him that he could carry that authenticity into other worlds without losing himself, that the very qualities that made him an outsider were also what allowed him to make meaningful connections across seemingly insurmountable divides. "Ready to go back in?" Sophia asked after a moment. James nodded, feeling more at ease than he had all evening. Whatever strange path his life had taken, he remained James Harrison, a farmer who loved his land and honored his commitments. That truth held firm whether he stood in sunflower fields or on red carpets. The clothes might change, the surroundings might shift, but the essential reality remained constant. And that, he was beginning to understand, was the actual definition of authenticity. Not some marketable quality to be packaged and sold, but the consistent core that remained when everything external fell away. 1 year after Sophia's fateful visit to his struggling farm, James Harrison stood in fields transformed not just by financial security, but by a new vision for sustainable agriculture. The sunflowers still grew tall against the Nebraska sky, but now they were part of a diverse ecosystem designed for resilience against climate challenges. The Harrison Agricultural Cooperative had expanded to 27 farms across 3 counties, its model being studied by similar communities nationwide. The Soleil Organic sunflower line had become the company's most successful launch in a decade, with a portion of proceeds funding educational initiatives through the cooperative. Caroline Lynn's documentary had won major awards and sparked policy discussions about rural sustainability. The Vogue farm continued to attract visitors, now channeled through programs that balance tourism with working agricultural needs. Most importantly, the community had found new vitality. Young people were returning to family farms, bringing technological innovation while honoring traditional knowledge. The nearby town had transformed from a dying rural outpost to a hub for sustainable agriculture education, with new businesses opening to serve both locals and visitors. As for James himself, he had found an unexpected balance between his role as a working farmer and his position as an unlikely cultural icon. He still spent most days in his fields, hands in the soil, doing the work his father and grandfather had done before him. But he also traveled occasionally to speak about agricultural policy, rural economic development, and the cooperative model his community had pioneered. His brief fame in fashion circles had evolved into something more substantial: respect for his practical knowledge and lived experience. The authenticity that had initially attracted attention had proven to be not just a passing trend, but a genuine value that resonated across divides of geography, economy, and culture. On a warm summer evening, as golden hour painted his sunflower fields with the same light that had caught Sophia's eye that first day, James hosted a gathering to celebrate the cooperative's first anniversary. Members and their families filled his barn, which had been transformed into a community space while maintaining its agricultural functionality. University researchers mingled with multi-generation farming families. Local business owners chatted with visiting sustainability experts. Children ran between tables loaded with food, grown within miles of where it was served. The energy was palpable, a community that had been fading, finding new purpose and connection. Sophia attended, having maintained her relationship with the farm and its people through regular visits and continued documentation of their evolving story. Her initial Vogue spread had expanded into an ongoing photography project about rural revitalization, with James's farm as its centerpiece, but encompassing many similar communities nationwide. "Speech!" someone called as the evening progressed, and James found himself standing before the gathered crowd, uncomfortable as always with public speaking, but moved by the occasion. "A year ago, I was a struggling farmer with a failing crop and a mortgage I couldn't pay," he began simply. "Sophia Vega came along and saw something in my sunflowers that I'd stopped seeing: beauty in imperfection, value in perseverance." He gestured to the people around him. "But what happened next wasn't about me, or fashion, or even sunflowers. It was about community, about remembering that we're stronger together than apart, about finding new ways to honor old values." James looked out over the faces of neighbors who had become partners, of struggling individuals who had found collective strength. The true story here isn't that a fashion magazine put a farmer on its cover. The true story is that we rediscovered our connection to the land, to sustainable practices, and most importantly, to each other. Sophia captured the moment with her camera. James Harrison speaking from the heart, surrounded by the community he'd helped revitalize, backlit by the golden light filtering through barn windows. Authenticity not as a marketing concept, but as a lived reality, visible in every face and gesture. Later, as the celebration continued around them, James and Sophia stood at the edge of the sunflower field where their story had begun. The flowers faced west, following the setting sun as they had for generations, their genetic memory unwavering despite changing circumstances. "Did you know this would happen?" James asked, gesturing toward the thriving farm, the gathered community, the tangible evidence of transformation. "When you took that first photograph?" Sophia shook her head. "I knew I'd found something authentic in a world hungry for it. But this?" She indicated the scope of what had developed. "This is beyond what anyone could have predicted." James considered the journey from desperate farmer to Vogue cover to congressional testimony to community leader, a path he never would have chosen but now couldn't imagine not taking. "Rebecca would have loved this," he said quietly, thinking of the wife who had loved sunflowers enough to inspire his crop choice even years after her death. Not the fashion part. She'd have laughed herself sick over that, but the community coming together, the farm finding a future. Sophia nodded, understanding the significance of him sharing this thought. "She's part of the story too. Those sunflowers you planted for her became the image that captured the world's attention." The sun slipped below the horizon, painting the sky in spectacular shades of orange and pink. Around them, the celebration continued, music and laughter drifting from the barn, children playing between rows of sunflowers, community members deep in conversation about plans for the coming seasons. James Harrison stood at the center of it all, a farmer who had accidentally become something more without ever being anything less than himself. His authenticity hadn't needed to be manufactured or marketed. It had simply needed to be seen, valued, and connected to others who shared his fundamental concerns for land, community, and future generations. As twilight deepened into night, stars appeared above the Nebraska fields, the same stars that had watched over 6 generations of Harrisons and would watch over many more to come. The farm would continue. The legacy would endure. And James would remain exactly who he had always been, a farmer who loved his land enough to find a way to save it, even through the most unlikely of paths. The authenticity that Sophia had captured through her lens that day had never been about perfection. It had been about perseverance, the determination to continue despite drought, despite economic hardship, despite an ever-changing world. In revealing that quality to others, she had helped James rediscover it in himself and his community, transforming struggle into strength and isolation into connection. Under the vast Nebraska sky, surrounded by sunflowers that still turned faithfully toward the light, James Harrison had found his way home again, a journey that had taken him far beyond his fields, only to lead him back to their essential truth, that what endures is not fame or fortune, but the authentic commitment to values that transcend time and trend alike.